So, I've been kind of being a bit too passive about pitching my favorite toys. So I decided to do a little bit while I've got a captive audience. Specifically, there's this tool I like to write and brag about called PSFramework. And it's a huge bag of whatever, and you might wonder, like, what the hell am I going to do with this? Okay, it can do logging, but what else can it do for us? So I decided, hey, I'm just going to write a PowerShell module right here, right on stage, and use some of the features to make my coding life easier and faster. So, the first thing I need is, well, some module parts in here. Because it's an empty folder, I have nothing here yet. And considering the event we're at, I also need a really event-critical module there. So I'm going to go ahead, invoke PSMD template, and I'm going to create a mini module. It's like a least complexity module with all of the bells and whistles, test pipelines, release, GitHub Actions, everything configured. And I'm going to do a proper beer manager. Need to make sure we got properly lubricated here. Manage your beer. And there we go. I now have a module with everything I need. We have some tests, so we can be stuck up about having all the help written, and most notably so I don't forget writing my help. Syntax errors, PowerShell best practices. The usual test stuff. We had an entire morning on doing pester tests. That's the end result. And we now have a module, and all we need to do is add some content there to make it all work. So, we need a function, and in order for us to be able to manage beer, we first need to, well, add beer. So, I don't know if you all watched the session on customizing your VS Code for PowerShell. You can fairly simple do some snippets that make your coding life easier. So I just want to have fun, and I get a function named for the file I'm currently in. Makes it a lot easier. So we have a brand. We have an amount. We might want to add some description, what kind of brand it is. And optionally, if we decide to provide that value, ideal temperature. Or let's make it just temperature. You should be consuming it at. This is an integer, don't do negative here. String. Fred, don't get hasty. And brand, which is also a string. This is mandatory. And no, the other two are optional. So we want to store some information. Let's throw in an internal file that just declares a module-wide variable so we can store all our beer in memory. Otherwise, we don't know what beer we have available. So that's and I'm going to make this just an array where I can put in all the beer and I can drink it because of that. Or I'm going to make this a hash table. So I can add in, if I've got to put in 2 Heinekens, I don't need to track this as separate values. And in here, brand and a PS custom object that brings in the values. Amount equals amount. Description equals description. And temperature equals temperature. Fred. There we go. Auto format looks nice. It's okay. Only thing I have not covered yet, what if we already have the beer in there? If beer then all we do is we increment the amount instead and return and our function, and we're good. So, last one for the function to be available. Step 1 done, we can now add beer into the fridge. Now we need to be able to look into the fridge, what beer do we have available? Which is simple enough, get beer. I'm accepting a filter with a wildcard. And we have our beer scope. And add the command to the manifest. So far there's not much drinking going on, we'll be looking into that later. But we now have the ability to interact with that. So import module loaded. I can add a beer. Brand Heineken. I'm putting in 5 of them, or let's go full 6-pack. And should ideally be at 5 degrees Celsius. I can now get beer, and theoretically, if I didn't mess up somewhere, which I did, that should have been it. So re-import with force, otherwise it's not going to do anything. And we're good. So keeping a few notes here. Your file notes.ps1. Let's add some other beer. And now I can, of course, go with get beer and get both of them. Or I can search for something like this. This is nice, but I want tab completion. Like, give me a list of what are the beers available. User experience is kind of important. And, well, we don't have anything here for tab completion so far. So, what can we do? Tab completion.ps1. Now, this is the first part where PSFramework really comes into the whole thing. We need to provide some logic what we provide. I can do tab completion with a validate set. The problem is I need to know what the legal values are at the time that I write the code. Which is a bit of a problem if I remove all of the beers that I wanted. So we need to have some logic here. And the command is called register PSF tab script block, tab, not tab, because it's, well, a reference to the original module implementing this by Jason Shirk, tab expansion ++, back in the old days of PowerShell 3. So, I need to give this whole thing a name and a script block that is then going to execute data. So, get beer. .brand. Now, I have provided that as part of the module import sequence, so we have now a script block that theoretically would calculate the values. Problem is, well, PowerShell doesn't know that our command should be using that for tab completion. So let's add that. PSF argument completer. Beer.brand. So, import, add the two, get beer. And suddenly I have tab completion for this. Let's add in one more. And suddenly we have yet more. So that's already nice, but we can make tab completion better. If we, for example, use the default tab completion for parameters, we not only get that information here, but if I do this in a regular PowerShell console, yes, I know we've got during the conference the next version. Let's go with the default get child item for now. Under each parameter, we have some extra information whenever we select something, which adds extra details. So we can do that in PSFramework tab completion as well. For each beer in get beer, we now need to provide a hash table. Text equals brand, and tooltip is the tooltip. So let's do a little calculation here with beer. That's not $_, it's $beer. Dot temperature beer dot description. So IPMO, let's steal it over into our PowerShell console. Add in some beers. The next version will even allow you to localize the tooltip. Thank you. Now, on the tab completion script log thing, there's one more aspect that I kind of want to point out here, and that is a parameter called cache duration. Sometimes calculating the data takes some time, and if the user hits the tab key and now the data is being collected, the console freezes until that is over. But some data just doesn't update all that frequently. Like, hey, what are my mail servers? What are my domain controllers? What are my XYZ? With cache duration, you can say, okay, for the next 8 hours, this is it. So after the first time calculating, it's just going to retrieve that from memory. Of course, that's not all that great if, unfortunately, you, the values are no longer valid and you still have that in memory. Classic caching problem. So use with care. So we are good with that. So let's implement the most important command in the whole thing. Without that, there's really no point in having this module. Remove beer. So the first one, we need an alias here because remove beer is may be PowerShell technically correct, but obviously this needs to be drink beer. You can set an alias for command like this. So we've got that. Put that into the manifest under aliases to export. And remove beer here. Now, we have removed beer. Obviously, we need to tell it what beer do we want to drink. Let's go with brand. This is a string, and it's, of course, mandatory. We also want the tab completion. So we can go ahead and copy that over. Now here's an important part, of course. If you want to drink the beer must exist. Can't be that, we try to drink something that doesn't exist. We need some validation here. And again, validate set would provide for that. But validate set means we now need to statically define the beers. But what if the beer's out? So there's PSF validate set. And PSF validate set allows us to specify the exact same tab completion as a set of legal values. So that's almost it. Now we just need to actually do something with it. And easy enough. Now we remove one beer. And if this is less than 1, we remove the entry from the fridge. So, ipmo, add beers, get beer. And remove beer. Oh, sorry, yes. My bad. How could I? Oops. I misspelled the beer brand. Should be double N or what? I'm not sure. Yes, should have. I just have an implementation bug here. Amount is a string. Why is amount a string? Because thread failed badly. I'm sorry, folks. I didn't see that one coming. Where? No, I'm just doing minus minus. That should work. Let's see. I mean, it's easy enough to check. We've got one less. So, tab completion, one of the more convenient features in PSFramework, easy to win. So, now, usually, I don't really, put in one beer after the other. When I'm buying, I'm importing it from a big list, like multiple cases of beer. So, we now need a command, import beer. So we need a path to the import file that is going to provide us with the beers. What parameter should we be using here? What parameter type? Yes, what data type should we expect here? A file path, you're trying to load a config file. We have a proposal, system.io.fileinfo. We could be doing that. The problem is system.io.fileinfo doesn't handle PowerShell relative paths. String would be the classic one, but the problem with string is we now need to do the path resolution, path validation. If it's a wildcard pattern, making sure we get all the files. Yes, we can do that. It would be the go-to, but this is about having fun with PSFramework. So what we're doing is PSF file. And for each file in path, for now, I'm just going to, I'm just going to return the item for a proof of concept right now. So import beer, adding it to our functions to export. And I need my beer config.psd1. I'm going to add a brand, which is, again, Hofbräu. We've got an amount, which is 12 in my case. And that's it. Actually, I might add the description in here. So, option 1. And let's make a second one here. And I'm just keeping it exactly the same now, amount. And in case you're wondering what I'm doing here with the cloning, Shift-Alt-Arrow down and you clone in VS Code the selected code. Makes it convenient. So, we've got a config file, we're trying to load this. Let's go ahead. Import. Now I've got import beer. It wants a path to a file. And that works just fine. I can try to just load every file in that folder, which is also going to work. So, now this is not a valid PSD1 file. Why is this not a valid PSD1 file? A PSD1 file expects a single hash table, not multiple hash tables. So if I try to load this file with import PowerShell data file, which I can do, that works, but it only gives us the first item. So, fortunately, import PSF PowerShell data file. And then, since we have this nice variable, we can use splitting. So, IPMO. This is going to fail. Oh. Add beer doesn't support the brand name. Why? I have the brand key. Oh, because it's an empty string. Did I mess that up in the config file? I mean, that's nice. That was a typo there. But didn't work. Well, no surprise, really. I tried to load the file that wasn't a PSD1 file. So let's instead take a look and just grab the beer config file. Well, that worked out for the Hofbräu. Loaded both of them, but it interestingly failed to do that. Why? Because by default, import PSF PowerShell data file is going to act as if it was import PowerShell data file, not import PSF PowerShell data file. So, PSD1 mode, save. IPMO, import beer. Ooh. Well, this is now multiple entries. For each datum in data. Data is already a plural word. So next approach, load up our stock, and we're good. Now, there's one problem. You see, my brother's actually given me his shopping list, his import list. And, well, where were we? Here on the notes. He's adding some notes here. The data is no longer valid. I mean, it still has all the items that I need, but there's an extra key in there that my command does not expect. And if I'm trying to import this now, oh, it has no idea about the key node. What parameter should I be binding this to? So, actually remove this, close that. Get beer, import beer. So, we have here hash tables. And there's a nice command called convert to PSF hash table, with which we can provide a reference command. For what command do we want this as a split? And with that, we will now remove all the keys in $data that do not match a parameter on add beer. So far that's nice. However, here's the thing, my brother isn't really a PowerShell person. My brother has absolutely no idea about PSD1. Okay, he's not an IT person in general and doesn't know about that stuff. But what he really has, import PS, actually no, let's go with get beer, convert to JSON, set content beer.zfj.json. Oh, Fred, your spelling today is great. Let's try again. So, we now have a separate config file, which is not PSD1, it's JSON. Now, how do I go ahead and implement support for JSON as well in my module? We could now read a file, make a case distinction. It's a PSD1, is it JSON, make it somehow work. Or we could simply not stop caring. Import PSF PowerShell data file takes both JSON and PSD1. You can even switch to an unsafe mode if you want. In that case, it allows you dynamic PowerShell code, which usually is forbidden in PSD1, which is why this option is called unsafe and disabled by default. So I'm going to stick to safe. So, great stuff so far. But we are doing highly critical business operations here. We need to add some proper logging to what we're doing. Especially, and most notably, when we do this operation. I mean, really, we need to track this. It's important. So there's this command called write PSF message, which allows you to generate log messages. Where they're going, how that's happening, we'll be looking at this later. But first of all, we just have a message drinking a beer of type brand. This is option V1 of doing this. It's going to work. So I'm going to stick with this for now. Import new version, import beer, drink, beer, brand. I'm going to go for Hofbräu. It's okay. It was probably logged. We don't know where, we don't know how, but we believe Fred is probably not going to be bullshitting here. Of course, we can also add a verbose switch, and then we get that information. Now, the first style of logging that we get here is straight to memory. The last 1024 messages will be available there, and we can look it up without having to go for a log file. This also works if the message was generated in another run space. So parallelization and logging in PSFramework don't collide. And let's select the last one and do a full list. We have a lot more information here than just the message. We get the function name, the module name, we get the full script call stack, how we got there, where we are. We know in what line, in what file. And a bit more information that can be useful. So, let's go back and do this right. This is not the way we should be generating messages ideally. I mean, it works. We just saw it works. This is better. We could also add some extra tags. We could also raise the level to be absolutely critical, or an internal developer notice, or whatever. There's different logging message levels for different logging levels. And one thing I really like is adding in a target, what we're working with. Import drink. The message is now shown by default. I didn't actually need to do -verbose. It's not a verbose message. If the message is important enough, it's automatically on screen. But the interesting one now, you can see the values that we provided, if the string values, are available as a separate property. Which means we don't need to do string parsing to get those values out of the log message. We have the level, we have additional tags. We can, when we come to configuring our logging later, determine I only want messages with this tag. I don't want any messages with this tag. We can decide this later. And there we are. So, our module is ready to ship. And our coworker is going to send critical bug reports to us with a full mock-up with what did you do wrong, what went wrong, here's the error message, here's the syntax, here's the full analysis, here's the version I had with yeah, of course. No, they're gonna say, Fred, your module is kaput, it doesn't work, broke, here's the screenshot. Screenshot is an extra. I like to have a screenshot, but it's usually the debugging information we get from our users is horribly bad. Also, of course, they don't keep the console open because we're on vacation, because everything going wrong happens about 1 hour after we're closing the notebook for the last time before we go. So how do we get better debugging information for troubleshooting purposes? Well, there's a command called new PSF support package. And it collects a few pieces of information we might find useful. It's a zip file. If we don't specify a path, it's going to dump the zip file on the desktop. If we have a script that might fail, there is also the option to specify a task name instead. If I specify a task name, it is going to create that debug dump under app data and keep the latest 10 debug dumps for forensics. Because let's be honest, my coworker is not going to remember to run the command in most cases. But we've got the dump file here. So let's expand, archive it, and I'm going to expand it in here. So now I've got this nice CLI.dat file. CLI.dat is the big brother of CLI XML. Or the lean one, depending on what you what you're going to call it, and there's an import PSF CLI XML. So why did I feel the need to reinvent that particular wheel? I mean, yes, my wheel is shiny, but why did I feel the need that I need to do this? There is actually a simple reason. And that is in the file size. CLI.dat is a regular CLI XML only with string compression included. So I'm saving a lot of space and getting a lot more performance because the main performance sink with CLI XML is disk I/O. So we have a debug dump and we generated messages. So of course the messages are part of the log. If we had any PowerShell errors, they are also included. My coworker obviously never did anything he shouldn't have been doing, which is why I, just in case, provide the history, because if he didn't do anything, there can't be any evidence that's a problem, right? So, classic one. What modules were available? In what version? Also, along with for the right, assemblies. What DLL files were loaded and from what location? Classic problem with Microsoft modules, a conflict with the MSAL files. Which module won? With that information we can know. Also, the last one and the greatest one, I grab a full screenshot. And this is something we can, in case of error, just collect somewhere and get that information. Helps a lot with the details. Now, question. Do you have to deal only with one language or do you have to go multilingual? Do you need to support multiple languages? Thank you. All right, let's do this. I'm creating a new folder here called strings. And en.psd1. So remove beer.drinking. And I'm going to add some value there. Specifically, we already have that here. Isn't that nice? And I'm doing the exact same thing here, only so we now need to load those language files. Need to point it to a path, which is going to be PS script root. I'm going to need to wrap this up with better path resolution for the module itself. So script module root. And I need to update this here. Script module root equals PS script root. So we know what is a module root. And this is not a PSD1 file, it's a PS1 file. Module root strings de.psd1. It's the module beer manager. And it is the language de. So, we're good with that. And I can now, in remove beer, replace message with string. So, let's hope I didn't screw it up too badly. we still get the message. My machine is in English, so of course I got the message in English. It is automatically detected by your operating system. So, set PSFconfig. I am now in a German PowerShell console. Now, this is also a logging command. And no, do I have now German logs? That would be horrible, wouldn't it? So we have here one message and one log message. If you use localization in PSFramework, the messages on screen don't have to be the same language that end up in the log file. Which leads us to that whole log file. We've only seen some in memory thing so far. So, PSFramework logging is plugin based. It supports multiple logging targets out of the box. And by default, we only have enabled the file system provider. The file system provider is an automatic debug log on the wrap data, which retains the last 7 days or 100 megabytes, whatever comes first. So if you want another log file, set PSF logging provider. Name log file would be an option. I should pick a name for an instance. I can have multiple log files active at the same time with different filter conditions, with different requirements. And the only thing we really need other than that is a file path where it's supposed to go. Don't do relative paths here. Do full paths. And finally, the last one, we shouldn't forget to enable it. And how does PSFramework logging work? PSFramework logging happens in a background run space. If you don't do it in the background, if you do synchronous log writing, and you're trying to log to a file share, the disk I/O for each log file write is going to delay your script. It's going to slow down your code. In PSFramework, your code just sends the message into a queue, and the logging run space in the background is going to process that into a log file. So that also means, depending on the concurrency issues, your logging plugin might not already be ready when you directly start the next log entry in the next line. So what you want to do is you want to wait until the logging is ready. If you want to configure multiple logging targets at the same time, only wait on the last one. So, time to drink a beer. And there's my log file. So let's do another logging provider instance. I'm going to make this a JSON file. JSON. And finally, in order for this to actually become a JSON, I need to tell it so. And because it's fun, we also have CM trace. Now, this is okay, but actually for this one, I only want the top 3 levels of messages. The lower the number, the higher the priority. So some debug messages don't get collected. So let's do some beer drinking. And we now have the CSV with all the messages, the JSON with nothing. Really? And the trace with that one entry so far that met the level requirements. Now, why did the JSON not properly flush? Oh, Yeah, I overwrote the instance name. I forgot to update the instance name. So I removed the JSON one. Little bugs. So you're here for your talk? You're going to set up here for, because it was on 45, there was another one.
45, yeah.
All right. Now, another fun part about this whole logging thing in PSFramework. We just now configured the logging in the console. We might have done that in the script. Our module can just send messages. It doesn't have to care about where specific the logs are going to end up. This can be decided by the script that loads our module. However, it can also be decided by configuration entries. We have a logging provider named JSON. So these are the config settings around that logging configuration. Export PSFconfig logging.config. Should have kept the path. So I'm starting a completely new console. I mean, it's even Windows PowerShell isn't even PowerShell 7. And ctemp demo, import PSFconfig. Come on, I know you can do it. Logging.cfg. Yep. Path. There we go. And the log file one is already enabled, and I can now send additional messages there. Well, I can also deploy the logging config by group policy. I can deploy it by environment variable. So it's deployable at any level that I want. I can do it on an environment for a function app, and the function is automatically going to log. We have plugins for log analytics, so it doesn't even have to be locally. And all the modules that send log messages natively tie into your logging config. Or if you don't want them in your script, set PSF logging provider name log file instance. Let's call it CSV. We also have exclude modules. So we can exclude and include based on the source that sent the message. So we're not forcing our messages into that log file, or event log, or console host, or whatever. And if the default logging options don't work for you, well, it's plugin based, and there's online documentation on how to create your own plugins. So, yes.
So 2 questions. The first question is on cross-platform. You said that it would write to the app data directory.
All right, the question was on how does it work cross-platform, especially with path-based config files from app data or where the log goes and so on. So PSFramework is fully supported on Raspberry Pi, on Ubuntu, or any other system that is in some way theoretically capable of running PowerShell. If you have to deal with paths, there is a nice feature in PSFramework called PSFPath, which will totally give you a path under that name. This will also give you a path on Linux under a different name. And if you need to redirect this to another path, you can override the path provided here. So even if my auto detection fails, you can replace that with your own path that works for you, and it is instead going to use that for all related tasks, such as debug log or where it looks for config files.
I can confirm that porting grace, but I have no questions. For the log analytics, does it support application insights, as in the tables that they use there?
Not in the plugin that I've written so far. It is, however, something I'm very open for a pull request. And as mentioned, if some of the way the logging messages are sent doesn't work for you, it's always possible to just write your own plugin to prevent problems that I did. Thank you.